Act on the Fly today, are recapping day 6 of the World Junior Championship happening in Ottawa, Ontario. So we'll hop right into today, starting with the scores from today's games. And we start off here with a 3-1 victory for Switzerland over Kazakhstan. And in this one, it was an interesting game, right? Where we have two teams obviously fighting to avoid relegation, making the quarterfinals, playing for that last spot in Group B. And it was one of those games where, Kazakhstan just kind of hung around, right? We talked about it yesterday in the recap video, sort of previewing the next day. And one of the things we talked about is for the Swiss, one of the key things to do in this one is to make sure for Kazakhstan not to let them hang around. And sure enough, they did, right? It was, a tie game at one point. You had Kazakhstan sort of just in there in the problem areas. And then Switzerland started to find their game, putting goals in. And then it was sort of a more calm approach for Switzerland, where they realized, Kazakhstan probably isn't playing for a win here. They're not pulling their goalie. Do we really need to do too much here? And sure enough, they didn't, right? They sort of passed the puck around, finished off the last couple minutes. And so for the Swiss, a big deal for them. They were able to win this game. 3-1 was your final. But, this was a game for Kazakhstan building confidence, right? Coming off of a big overtime loss against Slovakia yesterday, getting their first point of the tournament. And for Switzerland, they've had one of the better tournaments in this so far. Just haven't quite had the results. Very similar to Germany in Group A, where they've played really, really well. They just haven't been able to put the puck in the back of the net more than the other team. And so that's been sort of the storyline for the Swiss. And, when we look ahead to their quarterfinal matchup, which we'll talk about in a little bit, against the U.S., the Swiss have played a really good tournament so far. So it's not a cakewalk for the U.S. to go over them. And it really wouldn't also surprise me to see, Switzerland pull off an upset against them. But of course, time will tell on that. Can't get too far ahead of ourselves because there are a whole bunch of other games to talk about today, including, what do you want me to talk about? Anyway, second game of the day, Finland and Latvia. And this was a game for me that really caught my eye, right? We've seen Latvia at this tournament play very well, especially against some of the better teams. And so for me, coming into this one, I was very curious to see how Finland would play and try and break through that trap style that Latvia plays so well in that defensive game. And for Finland today, they played a near perfect game, right? Where they started off, they put the first puck in the net, and then they started to realize what we saw against Canada and what we saw against the US a little bit is that even when Latvia is down, they still don't push and try and score goals. They'll still stick to their style where they're going to play the defensive end first. And sure enough, in this one, it was no different, right? Where, Finland went up early. They were able to control the pace of play. And then Latvia basically just kind of buried in their own end. So for Finland, the trick was just don't make any mistakes and you'll be fine. And that's exactly what they did in this one. Maybe a couple blemishes here and there. But overall, for Finland, they played a near perfect game today. They controlled the pace of play. They were able to really penetrate the middle. And that's one of the hardest things to do against the trap, especially with a team like Latvia, who is very committed to that. And they don't even chase guys around the outside for the most part. They will let sort of that perimeter work go. And that's exactly what we saw with Finland today is they accepted that. They said, okay, if you're not going to let us score, we're just not going to let you score. And that was the trick for Finland is they just passed the puck around for the majority of the back two periods. 3-0 was your final. But to be honest, it was a boring game because Finland just played their game and Latvia didn't break off from what they've been playing, right? And it was a very tactical game for both sides, and it was one of those cool games to sort of watch, even though it wasn't necessarily the most exciting of games, sort of that back and forth action. Finland just played a really solid game today, and when we look ahead, they're going to play another trap style in Slovakia, and we'll see what they're able to do against it. Because in my eyes, it'll be very similar to this Latvia game, where Slovakia takes a lot of pride in playing the defensive end. They don't really take a lot of chances on the offensive side, maybe outside of Dvorsky, who has the skill to go both ways. For Finland, you're just going to trap the game away for the most part, sort of work around the perimeter. It's a little bit more of an aggressive trap style for Slovakia, but in general, for Finland, they're used to that, right? A lot of their players play against the European style in their leagues. So it's not like for guys like from, the US and Canada, where they haven't really seen it that much outside of playing in these international tournaments where they're sort of shielded away, and most of the time it's in that North American style of game, especially that we see so often in the CHL or the NCAA, where you don't really have that tactical game, but you really see it prevalent in the European style. So for Finland, when you understand the game the other team's trying to play, it makes it that much easier. And it's even easier when you actually know how to beat it because you play it yourselves. So for Finland today, we really saw that, working the perimeter game, working the high-low, working the inside of the ice. And they've had quite a few solid chances. A lot of their goals, I think today, pretty sure almost all three of them came from sort of right in front of the net. So for Finland, really good performance today against Latvia. They played their game start to finish. Feldberg's, again, was amazing for Latvia. And it's impressive to watch as this Latvian team sort of builds in their confidence. Yes, they're going to have a tough matchup in Sweden. But at the same time, Sweden and Kazakhstan was a fairly close game. Yes, it wasn't a close game in the grand scheme of it, but it was a fairly close game. Sweden and Switzerland, very close game as well towards the end. And so for Latvia, who really capitalizes on a lot of chances, if you're able to hold Sweden to a tight margin through the first two periods, don't be surprised if Latvia upsets Sweden in this one. I do expect Sweden to still win, and we'll sort of preview that one a little bit. But Latvia is a very solid team, and you really can't count them out at this tournament, as we've seen numerous times, whether that's against Canada, whether that's against Germany, whether that's, against a tough U.S. team, whether that's against Finland, right? Where even today, they're able to hold the game nice and close. Yes, Finland outplayed them, but they were able to hold in long enough to have a close enough game that at some point they could probably pull their goalie, right? So for Latvia, just sort of holding on as long as possible is going to be their key. For Finland, they looked really good today. We'll see if they can continue that momentum into the quarterfinals, of course, coming up on January 2nd. But right, it's going to be one of those sort of games. And we'll see which Finnish team comes out, because obviously we've seen a couple different phases of Team Finland so far in this tournament, especially, off the top. We saw them play a rough game against Canada, a rough game against Germany, a lot better of a game against the U.S., and then today's game against Latvia, which was, near perfect in my eyes. And sure, the score wasn't as high as you might think it would be, but it was a really good game and a well-played game, I might add, from Finland in this one. So 3-0 is your final there. As we move on to the third game of the day between Sweden and Czechia. And this game was one of those games where for Sweden, you could just tell they were the better team. And I know a lot of people, and even I've seen it in a couple of comments on these last couple days recaps, was about why is Czechia a dark horse, right? And this is the reason why, is because Czechia can play a great game, and they played a great game today. They just got beat, right? They just got beat by a better team, and that's exactly what we saw with Sweden. Whether it was the 2 goals, and I think it was 30 seconds maybe, and like sort of those quick goals where we see Sweden sort of use their skill, and we see it at flashes, right? Where we see Sweden sort of take control of the game. It was a very back and forth one today, but we saw certain moments where it was like, okay, that's what we're expecting out of Sweden, especially when they play some of the better teams in this tournament. When we look sort of ahead, yes, they're going to play Latvia in the first round for the quarterfinals, but then you look ahead of who they're going to play next, and you're looking probably at Canada or Czechia, depending on, what goes on. You might play Finland if Czechia beats Canada. But really, it could go any way. And it is an interesting sort of comp and team comp for Sweden, because they went a much more skilled route than they normally do. Normally try and fill their team out. This year they went a lot of skill, and we're seeing that especially late here in the last couple of games, where they'll hop out to an early lead and then they'll try and play defense. And that's sort of where they're missing from years past, where normally they build that sort of complete team that you're looking for. Sweden this year went a lot more of their skilled route. So when it comes to the defensive ins and outs, they might not be as good, but they always have that opportunity where they might counterattack and they'll probably score, especially if you get them on a 2-on-1 or on the power play, which we've seen Sweden be so successful with. So for Swedes, keeping the momentum going into the quarterfinal rounds, they played a real good game today. And for the Czechs, keeping that momentum going as well. They've had a great tournament thus far. All of their games have been pretty good, well played, well fought games, whether that's against Switzerland, whether that's against Kazakhstan, whether that's against Slovakia. The thing about the Czechs is that they're always a good team in this tournament, and they're always bringing their game to each and every game. They're not taking games off, and we've seen that with a couple teams in this tournament, Canada, but we've seen them sort of play certain games to varying levels. But for the Czechs, it's that consistent effort where each and every game you're getting their best. So for Czechia, it's not that they're not a good team and they're not bringing their game, or they're ups and downs. For Czechia, the only reason why they're a dark horse is because their team on paper just doesn't match up to some of these other teams. But at the same time, they've played a great tournament, which is why, to me, they're starting to become that dark horse candidate to win it all this year. You're looking at other teams like Finland, where coming into this tournament, you sort of had them fourth overall. Now, after seeing, Sweden, the US, Canada play their games, I don't know, right? Finland's already beat the US. They lost to Canada off the Open. It was a tough game for them. But it's been one of those tournaments where anything can happen in this one, right? Where I don't think coming into these quarterfinals, I'm 100% confident of each team is going to win and which matchups are going to be which. But it could honestly be a toss-up between any of these teams, which is just the exciting part about this year's tournament especially, is just the chaos in the group rounds, because it's been anyone's tournament from the start. We've had a whole bunch of upsets. We had Kazakhstan almost beat Slovakia the other day after scoring 2 shorthanded goals in the last 4 minutes. So this tournament has been crazy, and it's very hard to predict what's to come, but you really can't count anybody. And yes, I'm now procrastinating because I really don't want to talk about this game. I really don't. But for Sweden today, winning 4-2, big win for them. They lock up the top of Group B. For Czechia, they'll come second. And now we will talk about it. Okay, let's do it. Let's just rip it off. USA 4, Canada 1, and I'm trying to choose my words carefully in this game because, yes, the officiating in this game was questionable for both sides. I'm not saying for Canada, not saying for the US, but the question has to be asked, in my opinion. We're going to talk about the officiating a little bit later because it's in one of the questions towards the end. But you think about it, right? This is the IIHF, and those are the best 4 officials you can have on the ice for that game. Not saying one team or the other. I'm just saying in general, that was a very poorly officiated game. And when you look at it, right, three of the goals for the US today was on the power play. The 4th one was an empty net. One of the goals on the power play for Canada. Every goal today was basically on the power play or a result of the power play being scored on, right? And the amount of penalties in this one, I think, was 11 to 7, I believe, for in favor of Canada with the extra 4. And then 4 of those penalties were coincidental minors, so they canceled out. So really it was 7 power plays for the US to 3 power plays for Canada, and some of them were questionable, right? And I don't want to take sides here because obviously I'm trying to give a fairly logistical breakdown of these games, but there were some questionable calls on this one. A lot of angry Canadian fans because they lost, blaming the officials. Just stop it. Just stop. When you take 11 penalties in a game, you can't blame 1 or 2 calls on a bad call, right? It wasn't a greatly officiated game, but 11 penalties and you expect to win, really, against the US, who have probably one of the best power plays in this tournament, if not the best, maybe behind Sweden. But, right, like, it's the fact that I get we're trying to look for a scapegoat here with Canada, but just stop it, right? The reason why they lost this game is because 1, they're undisciplined, 2, they can't put the puck in the back of the net, and 3, they're terrible. They're pathetic in their own end. 5-on-5, I mean, they played decent, and tonight especially, they played decent, but their scoring chances were abysmal at best, and it's just, this team throughout this tournament has been getting progressively worse and worse and worse. Off the intro, you saw when Canada took the ice today, and you had the crowd behind you, I might add, so I've been to every Canada game so far this tournament, and tonight, I have to say, was the best crowd I've seen. Even after goals were scored, they were behind Canada the entire way, and that's the performance you give? Really? Really? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what's with Canada in this tournament. I don't know if it's they're scared. I don't know if it's the team comp. I don't know if it's the roster. I don't know what it is. And yes, I mean, their team was poorly built. They have no goal scorers on their team. Easton Cowan, I don't know what he's doing right now. I don't know if he's trying to play hockey. I don't know what he's doing. He looks terrible. He looks like he's somewhere else. You know, half this team does too. I mean, the only guy that's kept them in this tournament so far is Carter George and Ned and Ivankovic tried his best against Latvia. But still, time after time, it's poorly timed penalties. It's undisciplined play. It's goal scoring issues. And you're sitting Porter Martone, who's probably one of your best goal scorers, in the press box. Rykov is your 13th forward. Like, it's just the fact that they're doubling down on mistakes that were made before. You had the opportunity with Matthew Schaefer going down to make up for a big mistake. You had the opportunity to go out and grab the defenseman that could score goals for you, that could lead a power play. And oh my God, the power play sucks. Yes, they scored a goal. That was their second unit. That was not their first unit. Their first unit with Dickinson, Bonk, I'm going to miss some players here because I'm just going off the top of my head. Easton Cowan, Richie, and there's one more. That has been terrible. Like, even the fact that they're struggling to get the offensive zone it's been tough to watch, right? And even the chances they're getting, block shots into the breadbaskets, goaltender not moving. It's got to the point where you need something to change. And I don't know what that move is going to be. I don't know if that's putting McKenna on there. I don't know if that's knocking down Easton Cowan off the unit. Because at some point, I was watching the power play tonight, and they had basically Dickinson as the one-time guy. You had Easton Cowan as basically the playmaker at the top. And I was like, guys, really, what are we doing here? This is pathetic. But anyway, 4-1's your final. The U.S. wins this one on New Year's Eve. And a very happy New Year's to everyone. I'm sure a lot of Canadian fans aren't happy with New Year's, but the new year is around the corner. So happy New Year's to you and yours. And hopefully the new year will be much more forgiving on Canadian fans, especially after earlier this year, because remember the demons, what's going on? Yeah, Canada plays Czechia in the quarters. We'll get to that in just a second. To the news we go with the firepower. Kazakhstan sort of just missing a little bit of firepower against the Swiss. Those offensive looks, could have been buried. And I think for Kazakhstan, they're a good team. And I think if they're able to hang around with Germany, which I will be completely honest, I expect Germany to sort of dominate this game from start to finish. But if Germany isn't able to put the puck in the back of the net, which is one of the things they've kind of struggled with in this tournament, Kazakhstan is a team that will capitalize on every opportunity you give them. So, that firepower piece is something you got to keep in mind, especially in that relegation game. Because for Germany, playing for your lives in the next tournament, you need a win. And Kazakhstan's no easy beat there. For Switzerland, they did make history today as the first team since 1999. Well, not the first team, but the first tournament since 1999 with the new format to record a point. Each team has recorded a point in this tournament in terms of the standings. So that's a big deal, obviously, when you get to make history and the first time since the new format was introduced. So, big deal there. Sort of speaks to how competitive this year's tournament has been, with Latvia beating Canada, whether that's Kazakhstan, almost beating Slovakia, one opportunity away, whether that's, Finland beating the US, sort of just everything has been a great tournament so far. A lot of upsets, a lot of sort of games you weren't expecting to be close, and they are close. And then Latvia and Germany, it's just been a great tournament, all in all, right? So always cool when you get to witness a little bit of history. That's the history for today. Then to Finland with the finish, they played a great game, and what really impressed me was their finish today. Obviously the pun is there and intended, but the finish today for me was really impressive to see just how well Finland played and controlled the game for the entire 60. To me, this is a dangerous team in this tournament who will likely get to play a lot of teams playing similar styles to Latvia. So be on the lookout for them. They are a contender, and they are a dangerous contender at that. So look out for Finland. They're a team to watch in this tournament. For Latvia, the system, their system has been what's been keeping them in this tournament. So they're not gonna break away from it. They're gonna play their games. But if you are a team that's watching anything to do with Latvia, just remember, if you play the exact same way Finland did them, you're gonna be okay, right? And you're probably gonna win games, especially if you can get up early. So for the trick, especially when Sweden plays them in the quarters, get up early and then don't force stuff to the middle of the ice like Canada did, like Latvia, or like the US did, because Latvia will capitalize on every opportunity you give them. To the Czechs we go with rough facing, Sweden, better teams. And for the Czechs, it's a rough, it wasn't a rough game for them today, but you could just tell that they were outmatched in this one. For Sweden, just being the better team in this one, you could clearly see it. They are the team, in my eyes, to beat so far at this tournament. I mean, I've got to the point now where I don't know what to expect from either of the next two, with Canada and the US. Sweden's the only one that's made somewhat sense. They've won all their games like they're supposed to. You have to take them as the favorite, I think, at this point in time. But really, the US, Canada, both rosters that in theory should be good haven't been that good. The Czechs are a team that should have been okay, have been really good. And then you have teams like Finland who have been up and down. And if they get hot at the right time and coming into the playoffs, Finland has been red hot. Looks like a pretty good team to me. For Canada, this sucks. We talked about the problems with this team. Who knows what they're gonna do? And I started reading the post-game interviews tonight. I saw the one from Dickinson who said, penalties are penalties, it's not my problem, or something along those lines. You can look up the quote. I mean, it just sucks, right? What are you gonna say? It's I don't know. It sucks. That's the baseline. You have a New Year's Eve crowd ready and roaring, and then you give them that result, and I don't know. You know what? That sucks. We're going to wrap it there. For Canada, then on to the US with Freebird. Oh my God, I swear if I hear that one more time, I'm going to start bringing out a guitar and playing the solo. So, great goal song. God, it's annoying, and I hope I never have to hear it again after tonight's game. Move over now to the final standings, where we have the US in first place in Group A with 10 points, Finland with 8 points, you have Canada with 7 in third, Latvia in fourth, Germany in fifth, going to the relegation game. In Group B, we have Sweden in first, Czechs in second, Slovakia in third, Switzerland in fourth, and Kazakhstan in fifth place, who will head to the relegation game against Germany. So, big game there for those two countries, playing for their next year's tournament lives. And we'll see sort of which teams come out. Because we've seen sort of varying degrees of the Kazakhstan team, where they've played some good games, they've played some not so great games. And then with Germany, where they've played a really good tournament, just haven't quite got the results that they've been looking for. And, even in the game against Latvia, where they dominated play the entire game, but unfortunately they had to pull their goalie because they had to win in regulation. And then sure enough, they scored on the power play just a couple seconds after getting the empty net scored on them. So it kind of just speaks to how well Germany's played at this tournament. Just haven't got the result and haven't got that puck luck that you're kind of hope to see for them. And I hope that they are the team that kind of stays up. I mean, love Kazakhstan, but I want to see what's next. Who else is out there, especially with Denmark coming up next year. They're a team I think could make some impact at this tournament. So be very interesting to see there. But, at the same time, Kazakhstan's got a point already in this tournament. So don't be surprised if this one goes to overtime, because they're a team that just kind of sticks around until you don't take them out. If you don't take them out, they're going to burn you. So those are your final standings. The one thing I will mention in terms of semifinal qualification, remember all teams are reseeded. And it basically will go again, basically like a 1v4, 2v3, depending on where you are. It would go Sweden in first, US in second, then you'd have Czechs in third, Finland in fourth, Canada would be fifth, Slovakia would be sixth, and then you'd have Latvia in seventh and Switzerland in eighth place. And then remember, whoever's left after the quarterfinals gets reseeded. One plays 4, 2 plays 3. Both those games will be at the Canadian Tire Center and will be played on January the 4th. Canada will play the 7:30 slot. So for those who are wondering, if they somehow find their way through their last year's demons, then I guess we're back. I guess we're playing the semifinals, playing for a medal at this tournament by some miracle after losing to Latvia in a shootout. My hope bar is so low right now. I've got to the point where I think I've just accepted the fact that Canada's probably losing, but the Czechs are a good team. They've played well. Canada's a good team, haven't played well. Who knows? Maybe they're saving their best games for the playoffs, but after today's games, I have no idea. And we'll flip it now to the playoffs, right? And this is what we got. So we got for the quarterfinal matchups, US versus Switzerland, Finland versus Slovakia, Sweden versus Latvia, and the Czechs against Canada. Relegation game between Germany and Kazakhstan. So if I am giving my predictions here, US, I'm going to take over Switzerland. I think that'll be a decent margin, depending on how the US plays, but I do expect them to probably win 6-7-1. Finland over Slovakia, I'm going to take Finland here, probably 4-1, 5-1. I think is probably going to be run in total. Sweden, Latvia is a weird one for me. I've bet against Latvia this entire tournament. I'm going to continue to do so. I'm taking Sweden. But I'm going to take Sweden probably 6-1, 7-1. They've played a decent enough game throughout this tournament against weaker teams. I just think in the long run, Sweden takes this one by a pretty good margin. And then the scary one with Czechs and Canada. And this is one I've been wrapping my head around. You know, it's taken me a lot longer to record this video because I needed to cool down after the US loss, because you know how it works. And I've been really trying to convince, I've just been trying to find reasons, right, of why I'd take Canada over Czechia right now. You know, Czechs played a great tournament. Canada's looked abysmal. Their power play sucks. Their goal scoring sucks. Their discipline sucks. Everything sucks about Canada right now. And I've got to the point where I just don't think Canada wins this game. And so I'm going to take the Czechs over Canada in this one. I'm cheering for Canada, but I have to be real. And like, I've got to the point now where I don't think I can take Canada over the Czechia at this current moment from what we've seen. You know, we look back, they played a great game against Finland, played a terrible game against Latvia, played a pretty poor game against Germany, and then played tonight's game where they took 11 penalties against the US. And for me, I have trouble taking Canada in this one. I'm going to take the Czechs. I think it'll be a close game. You're probably looking 4-2, 3-2 Czechia, but it hurts me to say, but I can't in good faith take Canada. And what more can I say, right? They just haven't looked good. So Czechia, I'm taking in that one. And then semifinals will be on January 4th. Of course, we will have the recap for that one. But now to the timing of the game. So we start here on January 2nd with the relegation game between Germany and Kazakhstan. Sorry, I didn't place the Germany one yet. I'm taking Germany, obviously, and I think Germany will win probably 3-4-1. It would be your final. And that'll be at 11 p.m. at the Canadian Tire Center. 12 o'clock will be between Sweden and Latvia. That will be at the TD Place. 2:30 between the US and the Swiss. And I'm taking the US, and 5 o'clock, that 2:30 will be at the Canadian Tire Center. Remember, Group A, the top two teams, assuming Canada would have made the top two teams, would have played at Canadian Tire Center. But instead, the top team in Canada play at the Canadian Tire Center. So US and Canada will be the teams that we will be doing some live coverage for, as well. Germany and Kazakhstan will have all three of those games on live coverage. So if you want to tune in to our live coverage, it's on Twitter at OnTheFly1515, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. We will keep moving here with Finland at 5 o'clock between Finland and Slovakia. And then the last quarterfinal matchup, the one we've all been dreading, Canada and Czechia, a rematch of last year. Remember last year, Canada lost in this one 3-2 after a bonk shot deflection. Went in the back of the net, crushing. Okay, we got through it all. Now to the questions. Let's do it. Okay, we start here with a question from Kenny Kaminsky, who says, as a United States fan, Easton Cowan should be exiled from the country. And I think that might be a little bit extreme. but I do get your reasoning behind it. And he has been a lost cause these last couple games. And, he had a great start against Finland where he scored a goal and it was looking like this Canada team was back. And then, where did he go? Where is he? Easton, where did you go? Where did you go, Easton? And yeah, so hopefully he finds his game, comes back stronger than ever against the Czechs, because Canada's going to win that game. Canada needs their best players to be their best players. I'm looking at McKenna, Nadeau, I'm looking at Cowan. Your best players have to be your best players when the lights shine brightest. And Easton Cowan is one of those players you really need to shine bright. So for Canada, we'll see what they're able to do. Obviously, Kenny's having a great time right now as the U.S. fan, but I do think that that Canada really needs to pick up their game here if they want any shot at making it far in this tournament, especially on home ice. It's not every year you get the tournament on home ice, unless you're Canada, and you get the most years. But for Canada, you don't get it every year, so you really want to make the most of it. So for Canada, look for Easton Cowan to really pick up his game. Then we go to the next one from Drew Felton, who says, with Canada's poor performance, in my opinion, what do you think they lacked more? Goal scoring or just being undisciplined in general? And this is a good question. And for me, I have to think, their goal scoring is atrocious, right? But you can win games with poor goal scoring, but it's very tough to win games when you're taking that many penalties, right? You're taking 11 penalties. Eventually, they're going to end in the back of your net, right? We've seen it with Latvia where they're pretty disciplined and they win games because of that, right? They're not taking dumb penalties, but then they're not great goal scorers, right? They score goals when they're given the opportunity to, which is a lot like Canada this year. And their team's not built around that power game. We talked about it in the preview. They're going to beat teams by low margins. But they're playing right now like they're the U.S., where they're going to put in 7-8 goals a game. They're just not, and they're not built like that. And one of the biggest problems is their power play has been atrocious. It hasn't worked. So the goal scoring problem, you have a major problem with, and then you're also taking penalties. So I think the answer to the question is it's a little bit of both, but at the same time, you need to fix your discipline, because you can win games with poor goal scoring, right? You can win games 1-0, 2-1, 2-0. But at the same time, it's very hard to win games when you're letting in, 3 goals on the power play because you give up 11 chances, right? So for me, I think I'm going to go with discipline, but at the end of the day, it's a combo of both, because Canada needs to get bailed out by their goal scoring, but they also need to play a lot better defensively and take care of their discipline. The next one we go with from Nick, the Iihf fan, a great follow on Twitter, who says, "You don't want mine, trust me." And I do not blame you, Nick, in the slightest, because that game was something to behold, a rough one. So I don't know. I've talked about it enough. I'm not going to get into it. It's just, it's one of those games where Canada just looks like the new Canada, and I don't know. They're being annoying. And the next one we go, the last one from today, who says, from Aztec Braden, who says, "Stop crying about the refs. If anything, U.S. had 2 soft pens be called, while Canada took penalties a dead person could call. Lack of discipline has been their biggest problem. Shots on goal aside, USA dominated this one and converted on special teams." And, I completely agree with you. The U.S. won their game today, and they should have won it, right? Canada taking 11 penalties, I don't care if 1 or 2 of them were a soft call. And yes, they probably were, but so did the U.S. The U.S. had a whole bunch of makeup calls too. And so for people complaining about the refs, just calm down. You know it's not because of the refs. But if you want to put them as the scapegoat, so be it. I'm okay with that. We'll see what the Canadian team does coming up on January 2nd. Big game. We're fighting the demons again. Bring it on, Czechia. If you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching. If you'd like to drop a like. If you realize, consider subscribing. Tell all your friends to comment down below your thoughts on Day 6 of the World Junior Championship. Until next time, see you.